Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Friday Night Magic Spotlight. I'm going to do a deck on Standard once again. Also in preparation for game day, which is tomorrow, Saturday. I do not know if I'll be running which deck I'll be running, but the deck I'm going to spotlight for this week is Sultai Prized, which is kind of my take on mixing two decks together and really going for a graveyard mill type strategy. So I haven't really seen a deck quite like this. It is both going to utilize the Prized Amalgam as well as the Deathmist Raptor, and you just get so much power on board after you use like basically utilizing Deathmist Raptor in the graveyard with Prized Amalgam is if you can morph over a creature, it triggers off Deathmist Raptor, which then enters the battlefield from your graveyard, which then triggers off the Prized Amalgam. So what we're going to do is we're just going to run an all-out self-mill package to try to find as many Deathmists and Prized Amalgams in the graveyard, and then hope to get a Den Protector, and then morph over Den Protector on turn number usually like by turn number 5 we can, or even as quick as turn number 4, we can morph in the Den Protector and then Mega Morph it back to get back an early mill type card and then bring back a Deathmist Raptor and Prized Amalgam. So a lot of times too you're going to be casting your Deathmist Raptors early just to play defense, as they do really well against Sylvan Advocates and Tireless Trackers and cards like that come out early from most of anything out of Bant Company. They're going to do very well against, unless they get Reflector Mage back, of course. But what I like about this as an incredible matchup versus Bant Company, usually it's hard for Bant Company to really push through the damage they need to do early, and then you have your graveyard just to continue to recur things and kind of go over the top of the Bant Company. So we are kind of a mix between a few different Emerge decks and a zombie deck. We're going to run 2 Elder Deep-Fiends in the sideboard, a Decimator of Providences. This is usually the win con. Once you get everything established, you go tutor up with Traverse, and then either through Elder Deep-Fiend tapping things down, or Decimator of Providences with just a few Prized Amalgams and Haunted Dead with the Spirit, it can easily be lethal. We also have the control route with Voldaren Pariah, which we have one more in the sideboard, which you can tutor up with Traverse or find out of Gather the Pact or the Grapple with the Past. So this deck goes through our library quite quickly. Two Jaces to help us do that. They're basically a really good 2-drop. 2 Oath of Jaces, which I don't know why some of these other decks, especially the zombie decks, haven't picked these up, because Oath of Jace is the perfect card. You draw 3, then discard 2, which in this format, you want to get a Haunted Dead and a Prized Amalgam from your hand into the graveyard. And I found it to be the most reliable way to do so. We are going to run for mill, self-mill, it's going to be Grapple the Past and Gather the Pact. Grapple is very important because it's the only instant in the deck. And then we have a couple of sorceries through Traverse and Gather. I'm running a 1 of Vessel because I had one more slot, and I think the Vessel is another early turn 1 that we can do. And then it does put in a number of cards in the graveyard. It will put in at least 3, and then we can go and fix our hand if we need, like, and the artifact, of course, or planeswalker we don't have, but creature, enchantment, or land we can grab from the Vessel. So just a 1 of. It also helps with our Delirium getting the enchantment in the graveyard. So we do have a couple enchantments like the Oath of Jace and the Vessel. So if you're not familiar with how these decks work, a lot of times they just try to get a Haunted Dead in the graveyard with a number of Prized Amalgams. You discard 2 cards and return the Prized Amalgam or the Haunted Dead from the graveyard to the battlefield, which triggers off the Prized Amalgams. And then say you have a Haunted Dead and a Prized Amalgam, that's going to give you 3 creatures for a Voldaren Pariah trigger. You can also on turn 5, if you have enough sources, this one's a little bit tough for the black sources, but you can Haunted Dead for the 2, bring back our Madness of the Voldaren Pariah, because it does have Madness. It brings in the Pariah for the 3 black, and then it will bring in Haunted Dead, a Prized Amalgam, and you sack them all to Voldaren Pariah, and it's kind of like a one-sided board wipe, leaving you with a 6/5, and then you can just rinse and repeat next turn with the Haunted Dead in your graveyard. So great way to get rid of opposing creatures that are problematic, like Tireless Trackers especially, from giving your opponent too much card advantage. So that's just kind of the feel of the deck. Again, I've done some playtesting. It's okay. It's about 50-50 versus Black-Green Delirium. Very good versus Bant Control. Very good versus Black-White or Bant Company. Very good against Black-White Control. Pretty decent versus a number of the other matchups. Like it can clog the board pretty well against humans. I still think humans is a pretty tough matchup for this deck. but it does go over the top of a lot of the control decks just with a recurring theme. I decided not to go the Kozilek's Return route with this because I think Voldaren Pariah just works better as a board wipe versus most of the decks that I really worry about, with the exception of the Black-Green Delirium. Black-Green Delirium does have access to Kalatos, which can be very, very problematic for this deck, as we do have cards exiled. So a few other little tricks in here. We do have an Ishkanah, which easily comes out on turn 5 with Delirium. In the sideboard, we're going to run one more Elder Deep-Fiend. They're against decks that are weak against Elder Deep-Fiend. An Ishkanah against decks that are weak against that. We can kind of just go back over to like double Ishkanah, triple Elder Deep-Fiends, and Decimator Provinces, and kind of take out a number of these cards if there is, again, if we do have to play more of the late game. We can take out some self-mill, or even take out any numbers of like Haunted Deads and whatnot, and then bring in the Elder Deep-Fiend. And Distended Mindbender is really, really good against Emrakul. You can get rid of the Emrakul out of their hand. A lot of the Emrakul decks have ways to get it back, though, so just keep that in mind. I just like a one of Distended Mindbender because you usually don't want to see more than one. Same thing with Pick the Brain. Pick the Brain is my new little tech versus a lot of the Emrakul decks that aren't running Cokes. You can just pick the Brain and hopefully find Emrakul in their hand and then get rid of all copies. Or it's just really good on turn number 3. What I like about this is you usually will have Delirium on turn number 3 if you used a Grapple or even a Traverse, or excuse me, a Vessel. Gather, Grapple, Vessel on turn number 2 or 3 with these. A lot of times can have the Pick the Brain Delirium active, and then on turn number 3 or 4 you pick the Brain and find something out of their hand. Say it's like a Kalatos, say, or like a Languish, especially. You can get rid of all copies from your opponent. A 1 of 2 the Slaughter, because again we usually have Delirium, and this is really good against the black-white control because you hit their Liliana and usually like their Gisela, because we don't have a lot of ways to interact with our opponent. Speaking of like Gisela and Kalatos, my go-to card for that is going to be Gilt-Leaf Winnower, as it kills anything with odd or any of their power and toughness aren't equal. So again, that's going to be the two cards, Gisela, Kalatos, especially that give this deck problems. It still kills most things out of the Black-Green Delirium deck, being the Tireless Tracker or the Sylvan Advocate. Collective Brutality is really in here for humans, is the deck that we like to bring it in. It also is another good thing to kill the Grim Flayers and the Tireless Trackers. Sinister Concoction is going to be one more card that we're going to bring in for the control route against like Kalatos especially. So a little bit light on like interacting with the more ramp decks. Like usually want Transgress the Minds versus those type of decks, but I found that like usually on turn number 2 that's when we want to be like self-milling. We don't want to be casting and Transgress the Mind. Plus there's not a lot of room to bring out cards. Like the sideboard's kind of weird in this deck because you start to lose a lot of punch if you take out any cards from this. There's not a lot of these slots that you can really take out. Like usually I bring in Collective Brutality. It's when I take out some numbers of like Gather the Packs or Grapples. And because then these can kind of be my self-mill. It's actually usually Oath of Jace that comes out for Collective Brutalities. And then again, Ishkanah sometimes has to come out versus those. I do not like it versus Languish decks because it just clears the tokens and you just have a 3/5 Ishkanah, which doesn't really do much against most of their the cards in their deck. So that's a card that comes out quite often. There are some decks that Decimator just isn't going to be able to see the light of day. Then you can take it out for those type of matchups. So sideboard 2, we have Stratus Dancer and the Survivalist that we can bring in. Like I have taken out the Prized Amalgam strategy and just gone to like a Den Protector Deathmist Raptor, or at least the Haunted Dead aspect of the Prized Amalgam comes out, and then you just bring in the Stratus Dancer and the Survivalist, and now you're just basically trying to get the Deathmist Raptor to trigger off one of these Megamorph cards, and then the Prized Amalgams come back in. Yeah, so the Survivalist is cool because you can tutor up with Traverse and take care of any artifact or enchantment that might be a problem. There isn't too many in the format right now, but it's definitely an option. And yeah, pretty much self-explanatory for the rest of the cards in this deck. Another Ishkanah can come in versus decks that we do need to clog the board, humans especially. It's also very good versus Bant. So, and green-white tokens, I would say Ishkanah is very good against too. So anyway, that's just kind of like my take on this whole Sultai Dredge or wannabe Dredge type strategy. I'm probably at game day going to run a Fevered Visions. You can go over to gatheringmagic.com to see that list. It is running Reality Smasher again. I'm just in love with the Reality Smasher. I guess we can just take a look at that deck really quickly here. I ran it over at Gathering Magic. Haven't really changed it too much. But it is going to run, the only creatures in the deck that is going to run is going to be the Reality Smasher and the Alchemist. So I'm thinking about slamming a couple Jaces in here, but Jaces are kind of awkward because it's hard to flip. I think I'd have to go into like Evolving Wilds if I were to put Jace in this type of list. But you can go check out all the gameplay over at gatheringmatches.com. We're running like cards like Unsubstantiate is a 4 of and Negates is a 4 of because these both are just tempo-based cards that set back our opponent. Even against ramp, if you unsubstantiate or negate them, you set them back far enough to where then you can get visions out and then just take over the game. So you just keep on coming with the burn, and the visions keeps your hand full. And then Reality Smasher, usually, this card again is just so good in the format. Usually gets in there for 10 damage before they can deal with it, or it's just that card that you get up to that you can then hit for that last 5 points of damage. I prefer it over like Exquisite Firecrafts most of the time. So that's just, again, my little take on this little Visions deck that has been going around making the rounds. I think it's quite powerful. I have a 100% win record versus Black-White. It's probably the easiest matchup. They have a very hard time because they really can't interact. They have so many dead cards, and Negate Negate and Unsubstantiate just wreck that deck. Sets back their Gideons, sets back their Sorens. They have so many dead cards like Languish and Grasp of Darkness. Usually I'll take out the Thermal Alchemist versus that matchup and just bring in even more control, like the Summer Dismissals and the Clash of Wills. And then it's very, very hard for the Black-White control to really stop just damage to the face. Their best case scenario is one game they went like transgress, and I still was able to just push through enough damage against the Black-White control. A lot of times they put out like Liliana, and Liliana just doesn't do anything. Both Gisela and Kalatos just cower towards the Collective Defiance. I'm probably going to go up more counts of Collective Defiance in the sideboard, as it's just so good versus those particular two cards. The 4 damage is very relevant, kills Avacyn's. A lot of times you can kill like a Gideon token and do 3 damage to a Gideon if you need to do that. Or again, you just ignore it. You just kill the token and do 3 damage to the face, ignore the Gideon, and then you can be ahead on the damage race. And it's just, the Collective Defiance has just been a very, very good card. Testing out in Standard. So those are a couple of the brews I've been working on. Sorry, I apologize, running late again, so it's not going to be really snazzy edited video. But yeah, these are a couple of the brews that I've just been playing lately to pretty good success. The metagame is just a really big rock, paper, scissors format. I don't really think there's any boogeyman in the format. There's always like a counter to a deck, and you just have to kind of get lucky with what cards or what decks you face if you're doing like a standard daily or going to like a PTQ or whatnot. So anyway, this is one of my go-to decks. I think I'll probably be running this one at game day. I'll let you know what the deck does at FNM. The Sultai, which is more of a fun deck than more of a competitive serious deck. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.